next guests. United States SBA Administrator Isabel Guzman and GEN founder Jonathan Ormans.
Well, we're very, very excited to have you with us here today, Administrator. I will let the audience know that I've had the privilege of working with you for a number of years. And actually, I'm going to tell you something publicly today that I haven't mentioned to you previously privately, and that is that any of you may know that Isabel Guzman is the administrator for SBA now, but in a previous administration, in the Obama administration, actually was the thinker with the then administrator around the creation of what we did at GEN, engaging governments in entrepreneurship policy. We call it the Startup Nations community, and we have a Startup Nations ministerial that Administrator Contreras was responsible for doing with Administrator Guzman. And I had the great privilege of, at our Global Entrepreneurship Summit where President Obama came. And the one conversation I got to have with President Obama was about this very matter. He said, I understand we're doing this Startup Nations thing, but everybody else is telling us that they're following our example. So every now and again, I always like to tell other Americans, we need to go around the world and listen to the rest of the world, but it's very nice to know that every now and again, we're doing things like the example of your leadership in both the last administration and this, in helping to create a culture where government feels more comfortable talking about entrepreneurship. So thank you so much indeed for that. We're very proud of that. So we're here.
My mic might be off.
I
think my mic is.
Okay.
I might need to get, okay, back on.
Wonderful. So we wanted to have a short conversation today about, if we could, first of all, for those that don't know you, to learn a little bit about you and your experience. But also, we wanted to have a conversation today about the state of Hispanic entrepreneurship in the United States. You know, much of the discussions this week will be talking about entrepreneurship in different parts of Latin America. And I'd like to begin with that because it's quite astounding. We actually have the leadership of LBAN here, which is out of Stanford, and they produced an interesting report just recently that shows that the median compound growth was 8.7% for Hispanic-owned businesses in the United States, which exceeds white-owned businesses, which is only at 5.6%. So tell me a little bit. We've got 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses in the United States. What's the reason for this recent success in these communities in the United States?
Well, and I think for context as well, the economy in the United States has had a remarkable recovery post-COVID, and there's a reason for that. I mean, the Biden-Harris administration has focused on investments in America, really continuing to push forward on the president's vision of building an economy that works for everyone, building from the bottom up, the middle out, really leveling the playing field to ensure access to opportunities as we make these historic investments in infrastructure and in our manufacturing and supply chain based in America, as well as, of course, the clean energy economy of the future and those historic level of investments that the president has made. And so, this administration has been very intentional about making sure that working families and small businesses can have access to those opportunities. And so we've seen in the United States this historic small business boom. Pre-COVID, I'm sure you recall that we talked about the fact that business dynamism was on the decline. Our births were not strong. Our deaths were outpacing births in terms of business starts. And we rely on our small businesses to create 2/3 of our net new jobs. We rely on them to, of course, define our neighborhoods, but create the innovation for the future. And so this was troubling, but this has not just been a COVID recovery, because 2020 small business starts, that was definitely part of the recovery. But 21, 22, 23, this has now been sustainable growth. The top first, second, and third years for entrepreneurship growth, and we're on track to hit the fourth as well. 18.5 million new business applications filed, with establishments flourishing underneath that. And that is the context of what's happening in the United States. And so for Latino entrepreneurs who had been growing at 10x the general population for the last 10 years, they've also seen this boom. Their startup rates have grown 40% faster. We've seen now 1 in 10 Latino households own a business in the United States. There's more than 5 million businesses, and they contribute $800 billion to our economy. And really that, their growth is critical towards really spurring our economy forward. And to see finally some movement, based on these opportunities, this historic leveling, our dramatic changes in our capital programs, the lifeblood of businesses, the capital they need to grow, which we in the Biden-Harris administration have doubled our lending to Latino community in particular to $3 billion last year. We know that all of that is spurring that growth. But Latinos, I come from an entrepreneurial family, multi-generational. Latinos are highly entrepreneurial, and they're jumping in and are with bravery, starting their businesses, pursuing these opportunities, and starting to see some growth, despite the disparities in lack of access to capital or networks. But we've been focusing on that. We've been trying to shift it, and so we're very proud that the president's initiatives and focus on equity and inclusion in America is spurring the entrepreneurial activity from the very businesses we need to become globally competitive.
This has certainly been a theme of the Biden-Harris administration, that you've recognized the power of diversity in achieving sustainable and high-growth entrepreneurship. It's just been incredible to watch. We're very familiar with SBA. You have the SCORE program, you have the SBDCs, and of course you have the loans. But is there anything that you'd like to emphasize that the Biden-Harris administration has been focusing on, in particular, either to Hispanic communities, or that you're particularly have been concentrating on during your tenure as SBA administrator?
Yes, and to give just a brief synopsis of what SBA is, think of us as, the federal investor ensuring entrepreneurship is strong in the country. And, we invest about $52 billion a year, whether that's through our partners on the lending front, partner on the investment front, our direct disaster assistance, which, Puerto Rico knows very well, unfortunately, and our bonding, et cetera. We also try to spur and incentivize entrepreneurship where we know it pays off, with good paying jobs, with resilient businesses, so international trade, government contracting and supply chain, now digital technology acquisition. And so, that's SBA in a nutshell. We do capital, we do technical assistance and market know-how. But I've really tried to focus on building and strengthening entrepreneurship by being customer first, really understanding who our customer is, and it is women and people of color who are starting businesses at the highest rates and have been for the last 10 years, and meeting them where they are. And that's what the president has always been focused on. He even has an executive order on customer experience, requiring the agencies SBA signed on to ensure that we can be a government entity that businesses feel comfortable coming to for support. And it's been customer first, technology forward. Businesses adopted technology at such high rates during the pandemic, which is a positive for their productivity, for their market access. And so really adopting technology at the agency to scale. And equity, being equitable across our programs to ensure access. And so we've launched the most transformative regulatory reforms and changes at the agency to spur capital access, to really fill our mission of filling capital gaps. And proud to see some of that data coming through with more small dollar loans for startups, with more loans to Latinos and underserved populations. And we've expanded our networks. Here in Puerto Rico, for example, we went from 1 WBC Women's Business Center to more than 3 now. And so just wherever we can really expand and meet people where we are, that's been our focus during the administration. And I'm proud of the accomplishments and the numbers, which speak for themselves.
Let's talk about capital for a bit, if we can. I know that you've had a lot of new initiatives in this regard and a significant increase in investment, and I think this is extremely important for us to know. When I was your SBA Express products, some of the other new initiatives. But tell me a little bit, if we can come back to the fact that many of the Hispanic entrepreneurs report that they still have challenges accessing bank finance.
Yes.
And of course, at Gen, we often call it, we need to get the right capital in the right hands at the right time. And so we know that it's not all about bank finance. We actually have a fabulous partnership with Wells Fargo and Hello Alice, where we're looking at lots of new ways to be able to improve people's credit, for example.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit more about, have you had much flexibility as a public agency to be able to get creative about how we rethink this challenge of getting the right capital, particularly in terms of Hispanic and small businesses in the United States?
Well, that's what keeps me up at night, because our economy underperforms because we don't bet on and invest in our underserved populations at an equitable rate that would allow them to seek opportunity. And we need to change that if we want to grow our economy. And Latinos, of course, they have this incredible GDP. If they were a nation, they're I think it is Elban or Slay that does this, but $3 trillion. Or there they are, a $3 trillion GDP. Bigger than India or France or the UK in and of themselves, right? And but making sure that their businesses can be successful, because the businesses I said produce $800 billion, they could nearly double that. It's estimated they could get to $1.4 trillion of contributions to our economy if we would invest at them, so they could have the same growth rate. Of course, now we're seeing them start to outpace and catch up. But the capital programs and the reforms we've made have been about expanding our distribution network so that we can have more lenders and different types of lenders available to businesses to meet them where they are, and making sure that we can simplify our rules to attract our partners, because they have to deal with our complexity, but and also simplify it for the small businesses. So we've made some, especially in the small dollar lending space, historic reforms, because in the US, our small dollar loans had been on a decline since the Great Recession, and we couldn't get that reversed. We've finally reversed it in the Biden-Harris administration with these reforms. And so it's about making sure that we could reach them where they are, and that means investments in technology. So we've launched the MySBA platform with an enhanced lender match tool, so that for those businesses who, many of them go straight online to seek funding, that they can get affordable capital through the SBA. For those businesses that are growth oriented or science and technology innovators, we want to make sure they can get the investment capital, both equity and debt. And our investment company portfolio changes have also been historic, so that we can get check writers who look like the businesses that are starting at high rates, but also diversify across the country. And so we have really focused and specifically on capital access, because solving that as a country will really lead to our future potential.
We're very much focusing our conversation on the United States, but obviously this conference is looking at Latin America and the Caribbean. And one of the things that we've learned over the last few months is that there's a lot of interest, as you say, among Latino communities throughout the region in understanding each other's capital access issues. In fact, our Gen Invest team will be launching a Latin American council to focus just on this. Like, what are some of the lessons that can be learned? How are some of the ways we can better coordinate this? But is there anything that we can learn from Hispanic communities about what we should be doing differently? Sometimes you've done an incredible job at being able to try to listen to those needs and address them. As you said, for example, we were very excited to see all the work that you did in trying to take everything online, as you mentioned. But I do think that are there other things that we can learn that we should be trying to do that we're hearing from Hispanic entrepreneurs?
And what's beautiful is that what works for our diverse communities works for everyone. SBA's portfolio reaches everyone. So this is about inclusion and aligning with the president's vision there. But we, the changes that we've made, because we have working capital product that we just launched this past month. We have, of course, small dollar loans, micro loans for those businesses that are just getting their starts. And our expansion in that space and licensing more mission lenders is what yields that startup capital to generate new businesses. 60% of the loans that go through mission lenders, so nonprofit, mission-focused lenders, goes to startups. And that's definitely an underserved component. Most banks want those 3 years of performance to start to underwrite, and they need it, of course, for those larger dollar loans. But we want to try to leverage technology to drive those small dollar loans. And so allowing for diverse types of lenders into our system, allowing fintech, allowing mission lenders, allowing, of course, and incentivizing and continuing to work with our banks and credit unions that are so strong in the country. We know that it's an all of the above strategy and have really focused on providing products that are simple, but that cover all the different use cases for our growth-oriented businesses and our main streets across the country. And I do think you have to be aggressive in pulling together public-private partnerships to ensure that we can deliver. And that's the greatness of our guaranteed loan program here at the SBA.
The SBA is 70 years old. You've done a lot of work over those years in building those private partnerships. Can you help us better understand how that works? Because I know some people have asked me, so how does it work? Is it just a public? Is it a government loan? What are these private partnerships? Well, how do the mechanics of that work for, just through the eyes of a small business person understanding it?
I mentioned, $52 billion. Well, $34 billion of that is in my core lending products, the 70 and 504. They have horrible acronyms, but it's basically, the asset building and, working capital, equipment purchases, et cetera. But those loans are guaranteed, backstopped by the federal government. So, and distributed, of course, underwritten by our lending institutions. And those lending institutions is what we're focusing on expanding. But we basically are the backstop. If they were eligible, if they were able to follow the rules, which I've talked about simplifying, then the bank can come back to Uncle Sam and get that government guarantee, 75% plus, up to 95% for our capital. So we want to make sure that that's incentivizing perhaps what a bank views as a more risky loan. They need the backstop of the federal government to come in, but we see that as valuable and worth it in terms of our investment in America, because entrepreneurship is critical for our economy. And so that's where we incentivize entrepreneurship. And on our investment products, where we work with over 300 licensed investors in our small business investment company portfolios, we provide, again, leveraged dollars so that they can up to 2x their dollars that they're investing in businesses through debt and equity investments, and really try to push that towards especially early stage, critical for national security and critical industries types of investments that yield oftentimes that 5x multiplier in terms of job creation.
That's fantastic. So you're known for being, of course, an advocate for women, of course, for all the underserved communities, for, of course, Black Americans and Hispanic Americans across the board. Where did all that come from? Give us a little bit about you. I know your father had vet hospitals. Is that right?
My father was a veterinarian, so I grew up from 1 year old seeing him in his vet hospitals, and I worked since I was 12. I think it's this, coming from an underdog community myself, I love that, underdog story, that power to be resilient and overcome. And, I see that in the face of our women who face barriers to capital, who face, everything from, childcare issues to, you name it, burden on top of their normal everyday challenges as business owners. And same with people of color, where there have been systemic issues limiting their access, limiting their performance, forcing them to have to overperform. And if you think about it, you have maybe a Black-owned business and a white-owned business, their cost of capital might be a lot higher, and they're trying to perform and really build something at scale. I want to unleash that potential and make sure that our country can give those underdogs a fighting chance, and as the president says, a level playing field. And really, that's what my passion is. I think I get it from my dad, who's the entrepreneur, of course, but my mom, who was the teacher and the advocate. She's the one who went into the principal to fight for us to get into the honors classes, or fought for us, and always spoke up and taught me to speak up. And so from a young age, I did emulate my mom, who's the advocate, who speaks up and who is the protector. And really, I enjoyed that part of speaking up for people.
Ask you, your former boss in the last administration, she used to say, my kids, my parents, I believe it's her parents or her mother, said, when you grow up, you could become a secretary. I think that's what she said. Right. And then I think she didn't realize that she would be on the cabinet of a typing secretary as opposed to a secretary like a minister. What did your dad and mom tell you when you were younger? Did they tell you you could do this? Well, or did they want you to join the veterinary industry?
No, not the veterinary industry, but my dad, of course, is a veterinarian, but also a businessman, loved that side of his work. He worked all day long on dogs and cats and birds and everything else, but in the evening he really loved getting back into his business, right? And he just wanted me to enjoy my life working in businesses. I've told people that he wanted to see me just in any type of business. He said it doesn't matter what it was. He wanted me to buy a ladder company at some point, and I'm like, a ladder? That doesn't sound fun. I went and did something in studios in Hollywood that sounded more sexy, but he loves businesses. He loves the challenge of understanding your financials, being there and understanding what your customers need, and building something to scale.
That's why you've been such a great public servant, as you've obviously walked the talk as an entrepreneur, and you've done this. I have one last question for you, if we can. Too,
my dad, of course, and my mom are incredibly proud that I've taken this public service stint as well. I mean, they value giving back to the community as well. They're entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are always giving back to their community, and so I can't not say that. They'd be upset.
Well, I'm sure they're also proud of your small businesses and your business career along the way in doing that. I have one last question I want to ask you, and it's a little bit related to the fact that our theme for this week is that we're trying to look at this notion of setting a vision, setting a big sort of, they often say, man on the moon goal that we can pursue collectively. And it takes a longer term horizon. Most people don't have the privilege of thinking 10 years out, but painting a picture 10 years out, you obviously have had a lot of experience, obviously sitting in the cabinet of a president of the United States. You've obviously had a lot of experience, particularly with SBA and with small business. Of course, SBA exists under charter by the United States Congress, so you can't tell Congress what to do, but tell me a little bit about, where would you like to see SBA? What do you think entrepreneurs are telling you as you listen to them? Are there any things that you wish SBA could do? And I don't know whether you're allowed to answer that question.
Yes. And this has been, with the White House's full support. President Biden had proposed in his Build Back Better agenda a really strong industrial policy and a strong vision for how we can ensure entrepreneurship as well. And that was fully leveraging SBA's authority for direct lending. Direct lending is something we do when we fill gaps in disasters and help people who are uninsured or underinsured get financial relief. We do the loans directly. And during COVID, remember the scale of the SBA, about $50 billion a year. During COVID, President's first year, we put out $500 billion. We scaled dramatically during COVID to really help support businesses.
How you managed that, by the way?
It was $1 billion a day in the summer of 21 within our direct lending program, COVID Idle, and in particular where we scaled. And this, that money was, for many businesses, the first time they were able to access capital in a traditional way that wasn't factoring or high cost of credit cards, et cetera. And so I do think that pushing the president's competition agenda, especially as we continue to fight inflationary pressures, is really a vital part of his industrial policy. And we've focused on increasing the number of lenders. That's increasing competition, challenging people to look at small dollar loans, underserved communities. But when there are gaps to fill and there are no private lenders willing to follow our eligibility standards and underwriting to make that loan, the SBA believes that it should be able to make that loan. We have the the authority, but we need further financial authorities from Congress. This would be a zero subsidy program, as it is across the SBA's programs on a typical basis. And so direct lending from the SBA would ensure some gap filling. And some states, attempt to do that across the country with SSBCI, but we really believe that's critical. And as the president said as well, in terms of vision for the future, the first day we met when he announced me, he shared his concern that those who don't have the CPA or the banker or the lawyer on speed dial are the ones that we saw left out of the early rounds of relief. And our goal was to fill those gaps and bring people back to sustainability into the future. We have to continue to look at that as we drive our economies forward. Where are those gaps? How can we ensure that no one is left behind? Because you never know where that incredible idea comes from. And in SBA's programs, our microloan has helped spur Sweetgreen, a national chain of salad restaurants. They got an SBA microloan because they couldn't get a bank loan. Chobani Yogurt got an SBA loan to buy his manufacturing facility, to make it in America. We've had, through our investment portfolio, we helped fund Tesla, Federal Express. Fred Smith will tell you that the SBIC investment really helped him to keep going in that valley of death. And of course, our innovation grants have helped Qualcomm, CRISPR technology, and many others. So where are those future great entrepreneurs and those big brands? They are increasingly coming from women and people of color. And to the president's credit and his vision for backing everything small business and what we do at the SBA, we've been able to solve some of those gaps, but that's what we need to continue to solve into the future. And we have to be iterative. I tell my team we have to be as entrepreneurial as the small businesses we serve, and that means constantly iterating, constantly pivoting to continue to serve the changing marketplace and our great entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you for that. You've done a fabulous job at bringing people along with you and trying to fill those gaps, the partnerships. I'm very proud to say that we are a tiny nonprofit organization, but in the last 3 years, we've been able to fill those gaps through partnerships with people like Hello Alice. Carolyn was up here, Carolyn Rods earlier, and great, frankly, companies like Wells Fargo and eBay and a variety of foundations, and FedEx, for example. We were able to give $23 million in grants, and we focused on those that for some reason the rules didn't allow them to be able to be supported, as you say, some of those particular gaps. And I think, so we want that too, because we're not in a position to do that, some of us in the private sector. So we're really thrilled with that aspiration. Well, I want to thank you so much indeed. I want to let everybody know that the administrator will be leading a ministerial that will be taking place tomorrow. We have senior government leaders coming in from throughout Latin America, and we'll be continuing this conversation on a government-to-government level. But I want to especially thank you for spending so much time with us here in Puerto Rico. I know it's not the first time, your first time.
My third visit, I'm very proud of that.
Your third visit here, fantastic.
Because this is an incredible, I have to add this because kudos to anyone here from Puerto Rico, from the island directly, if you're here. We have about 50,000 small businesses on the island, but those new business starts, typically when I travel to different states, and new business applications is about half to maybe, 3/5 of the total number of businesses in the state. Well, in Puerto Rico, there are 78,000 new business applications. That's really, spurring what I was talking about in terms of the Latino growth rates. And so this is an incredible place to be for entrepreneurship. And I know that the governor and the minister are very proud to focus on this issue in the island as well. So it's my honor to be here.
Thank you so much indeed. That's great. Many, many thanks. Thank you, Administrator Guzman.
Thank you.